Welcome to the second and final instalment of my chat with INAV developer and maintainer Pawel Spychalski. If you haven't watched the first episode, I've left a link in the video description so you can watch it. In this second episode, we talk about his FPV and other projects, the demise of the single ESC and the FPV and RC hobby in general. So let's just pick up where we left off. So I know that you get interested in lots of stuff. I've seen some real wild and wacky projects, you know, your 3D printed paddle boat and all sorts of things.
Wait until you will see my electric bicycle.
Oh, don't. So I made one of those several years ago, and I have a skateboard that I started building probably about 3 years ago. And I sat down and worked out how fast it would go, and just ignoring any legalities or illegalities of riding it on the public roads. I'm too old for that.
Mine will not be fast. Mine will only be scary. Really very, very scary, because it will be propeller propelled. Propelled? Propeller propelled.
Vertical takeoff?
No. I don't have good batteries enough to deliver that kind of the power.
Be an interesting project. I think I mentioned it before. I've sort of had a hankering to convert one of my wings. I've got a couple of wings. I don't fly them very often. But converting that to sort of vertical takeoff as well, sort of like slamming almost like a quad frame into a wing.
This is a very popular request for INAV to have a VTOL. But we always reply, not really go with Autopilot. Because, it would be a cool thing, but I'm afraid that, for example, I don't have the time or the money or the just time required to bring the VTOL support to INAV in the reasonable future. If, of course, anybody would like to consider donating a fully working airframe, then maybe this could speed things up, but maybe not, so you never really know.
But that's the whole point of open source software, isn't it? People are working on the bits that interest them. There's no commercial gain for it. Trying to get somebody to fix something that they want is not going to happen unless there's somebody in the dev team who is particularly interested in it. Obviously, bugs are fixed because bugs are bugs and they need to be fixed. But
nothing has to be fixed. Nothing really has to be fixed. I
know. I get what you mean.
I know it will one more time sound strange, but there is a price you pay for the free software of the open source. And the price is the support, and the price is the lack of the ability to demand stuff. I know that people are not reading the license under which basically all open source software are released, and all the licenses have something that translates to use it, but don't tell us that it's broken. We take absolutely no liability if something goes wrong with this. There is no warranty. This thing might even explode, and you cannot demand any kind of the compensation for the troubles. Because if the developers could be taken liable for the potential damage, or however you're gonna call this, then nobody would be doing that. So when you are using the open source software of any kind, you are on your own. It's not that the developers don't want to fix problems, bring new features, but everybody has to remember that developers are doing this in their free time, for free. There is no funding. The majority of the open source project has zero budget, no money at all. Nobody pays anyone. Nobody gives any money, because if anybody can just take something, they will just take something, not to give anything back. There are exceptions, but this is a general rule. And if anything happens, if anything good, any improvement happens, it's only because someone decided to sacrifice his free time into doing that. There's only a free will and only the willingness of the heart to bring anything. And that's just the situation. You are on your own.
Yeah, but it's a testament to the quality of INAV when some of the most expensive FPV drones that I've ever seen run on INAV. Some of those cine lifters I've seen, which are, they're expensive.
Maybe not even the machine, mostly the camera that it's connected to the cine lifter.
Yeah, that's true. But
Yeah.
that's one of my motivations for using INAV. I don't want to trust my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, which is not an expensive camera. It's an expensive camera for me.
It's a very cheap one. It's very cheap.
I don't want to put something that's worth £1,000 on as a camera onto.
It goes like that. The FPV, the flight controllers, those are not experimental things anymore. 10 years ago, when there was ArduPilot and the multi-wii and everything was developing very rapidly, then yes, from version to version, there was a pretty big chance that everything will explode and very rapidly land. However, all major projects that we have right now they are mature projects. ArduPilot, extremely mature project. Betaflight, mature project. INAV, mature project. We do not have legacy problems anywhere. And new versions are to bring new features that are usually even not connected with the existing features. So the chance that there is a hidden bug somewhere in any of those three major flight controller softwares is rather pretty slim. And the safety and trust for the flight controller should come mostly from the set of the features that the flight controller offers. Because let's be reasonable for a minute. If you really want the top-notch, the most reliable software you can flash your cine lifter with, it will be ArduPilot. Because if you want to, you can have redundancy receiver, redundancy GPS, and everything like that. So you can have two of everything. Then comes INAV, which has no redundancy at all. Because this is a hobby grade, we do not have the aspiration to be the professional grade. However, yeah, it kind of like, it's reliable, but let's call it like that, which offers most of the, maybe not most, major functionalities that also ArduPilot offers, but the package is slightly simpler to use. Whoever set up ever ArduPilot knows that it's not the simplest project ever, and you could get a PhD only from doing that.
You need the UI is all over the place.
It's abysmal. Let's call it like that. It's abysmal. But with INAV, you get the basic safety features, because you have position hold, you have return to home, you have landing, you have properly working fail-safe, etc., etc., etc. And then you have Betaflight. With Betaflight, everybody should remember that the goal of the Betaflight is different, because the Betaflight was never created, the Betaflight was never developed as the professional software to be used on the super mega expensive drones. The main goal is to have top-notch, best possible performance on the freestyle and racing 5-inch quads. This is the goal of the Betaflight. And Betaflight, because the scope of the project is very narrow, does this perfectly. If you really want to have best of the best of the best of the best possible flight performance, because you are a racer or you are just like do the flippity floppy around the tree and you really like want to best of the best, then most probably the Betaflight 5-inch quad will fly the best. This is absolutely true. However, Betaflight lacks this let's be honest, basic safety features. But not because there are bugs, but because they were never really implemented, they were never really in the scope. So, what happens if you flash your Betaflight, Betaflight to your cine lifter with the expensive camera and you go into the failsafe? Well, it's pretty simple. The GPS rescue will trigger in, Of course, if you are farther than 100 or 200 meters from yourself, your cine lifter will rapidly come close to you at 20 meters, and then it will disarm.
Lovely.
Okay. 5-inch racer on the freestyle machine will survive this no problem, because it will land on the grass and this is carbon fiber. Maybe you will have to replace one of the propellers. But the cine lifter might even might survive, no problem. But the camera that was on your cine lifter, well, most probably won't.
No.
That's the difference.
That's what I think INAV sits neatly between Betaflight. They all have a different focus. RG Pilot, INAV. Obviously, you've got EMU Flight as well. I just skipped that one. But you've got Betaflight, INAV, and you've got RG Pilot. And I've flown them all. I started on RG Pilot. And it's what I find interesting is you can do freestyle. You can do acro with RG Pilot.
Of course you can.
But I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
No, because this was never in the scope of the ArduPilot project. The ArduPilot was never about freestyle.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
simple. Betaflight was never about the return to home, and ArduPilot was never about the freestyle. And INAV, yes, you sit somewhere in between. This is our niche, let's say, the middle.
It is quite a wide niche, though, because I think it overlaps those other two flight controller software.
In functionality, I think it more overlaps Betaflight than ArduPilot, at least in terms of the usage. Because if somebody asks me, hey, which software should I flash to my machine? I will, if this is something clearly for the ArduPilot, I will say flash ArduPilot, because you will be better with ArduPilot. However, if this person has this very super specific requirement to be the faster racer on the planet, then probably go with INAV, because 95% of the functionalities on the INAV and the Betaflight, actually, they are the same. They overlap. With ArduPilot, the overlap is smaller than with the Betaflight, I think.
I know when I started out in multi-rotors, because I've been involved in ready control models since I was this big, but it's only really since probably 2015, 2016 that I sort of got involved with multi-rotors. And the couple of the guys that I started out with, who I met, just flying around a local field, one of them is still racing. And I occasionally go along to see him race and realise that I haven't got fast enough fingers to do that. But if you walk round and see what people are using, there's still a lot of people using KISS, which I found really surprising. I don't know why. I've flown KISS before, and it's quite nice for acro.
Influencers. Over here, we have to assume that this is mostly because influencers. KISS has the advantage of KISS delivering both the hardware and the software part of the, and this is not open source. Let's also remember, KISS is not open source. You pay for the hardware, you pay for the license to use the software. You can demand. This is sometimes good to be able to demand something, and. I never flew really like KISS, so I cannot really tell if this is really something that amazing or not. However, a lot of people I kind of know or vaguely know highly recommend KISS. Is it because this is really the best or the best or the best, or because the influencers said so? I don't really know, but there is something to that indeed.
Yeah, from experience, that was the first flight controller software I used that was dedicated for, acro performance after I had my brief sort of exploration into RG Pilot. And I started on, bigger quads. Well, they weren't quads, they were hexes actually, quite big, camera carrying, DJI tight functionality. But KISS, I found it flew very well. ESCs used to explode pretty often. The hardware has improved, like all hardware. I think hardware has improved, and there is an endangered species that I don't know if you thought about, the single ESC. There was a time when 4-in-1 ESCs were, people said, no, don't use them, because if they blow up, you've got to throw the whole thing away. You know, if you've got one FET that's blown. I don't see anybody using single ESCs these days, apart from the large multi-rotors that are carrying very big cameras.
You're correct. I'm not really sure if this was more like the fear of something being broken, or actually there were enough of the data saying that the 4-in-1s will explode faster. I will tell you like that. In my career, I lost like 4 ESCs. 3 of them I lost in the 2015 on my ZMR 250 when I had some strange ESCs that were doing crazy stuff and they just burned. Okay, but they were like 12 amp ESCs, so maybe that was the reason. And then the only ESC I'm not counting the Hacker C, which were just like smoking up automatically. You just plug them in, they were smoking. And then I think I lost one ESC, and it was single ESC. And this was most probably only because I messed up with the wiring, and most probably I just shortened one of the phases on the motor, and the ESC just smoked. And that's all. I never lost any 4-in-1 and or any other ESC besides those exact cases. Because the hardware, just like the software we discussed just a moment ago, went out of the experimentation phase. In the beginning, nobody knew how to make a good ESC. Of course, yes, specialized people knew how to use the brushless motor controllers, because this knowledge is in the industry for always, because BLDC motors are everywhere, etc., etc. But nobody knew how to make a good, reliable, and cheap, because the cheap is always the answer, ESCs for the RC hobby. So there were experimentations. People were using maybe the too small of the MOSFETs, not putting enough of the capacitance on the input, not adding the TVS diodes to cut off the spikes, etc., etc. But then we learned, and in the moment when we learned, it's really hard to build a ESC that will just kill itself without any reason. Because if the company was selling such a ESCs, they probably went out of the business. Only the companies that learned and started doing that actually survived. And this applies to everything. This applies to the ESCs, flight controllers, cameras, VTXs, you name it, everything.
Absolutely true. Although I haven't blown anything up for a very long time. In fact, I haven't even broken a prop for a very long time. Maybe I'm just more cautious these days, or maybe I'm getting better, or not taking the same risks, who knows.
Let's just say that we all are getting slightly better with time. Yes.
I think so. I think there's all those elements are true. But I did blow up an ESC, a 4-in-1 ESC the other day.
Oh.
And it was,
sad.
I made classic schoolboy error. I'd put some screws through the frame that were too long, and they'd actually shorted some of the windings in the motor.
You shortened the face in the motor, exactly.
I haven't done that for years. Thinking why won't these motors go? Why?
That's why I always use the caliper. I always measure the screw, exactly the thickness of the arm, the thickness of the base of the motor. The caliper is one of the most important tools anyone can ever get.
Yes, you can't survive without that. But it's it's because I was experimenting with some different thickness arms on a quad that I designed, and I had some 5mm thick arms on a 4-inch quad, which sounds weird, but
it does.
Like doing something about it. And I just thought I'd put some thinner arms on just to try it, to see what the resonance was like in the frame with sort of 3mm carbon as opposed to 5mm carbon. I just put the same screws in. Didn't even think.
Okay. Yeah, that explains.
Just tighten these down. That's good. Finger tight. Yeah, well, not finger tight, but you just nip them up so they're just about right. And I thought, why are these motors not? What have I done?
Wrong?
So I flashed new software on I put Blue Jay on, and I did a whole load of stuff, and then You just, did I see smoke? Just that little wisp. And you look at it and you just, you idiot. You have.
Yeah.
But,
Absolutely,
it's, I think we all get, as we've made, you don't learn unless you make mistakes. And even when you've made loads of mistakes, it's easy to make more mistakes.
Even more mistakes and even more costly mistakes, absolutely.
So, and I do occasionally get people who sort of, I've got this quad that I've built. Why won't the motors spin? I thought, yeah, that's easy. And these days there's more things, especially if you've got Betaflight and, you've configured it to use RPM filtering and, that's set on, but, you haven't got the right firmware on the ESCs. There's lots of things that can stop things working. And to me, that was always part of the sort of attraction of flying multirotors, because it encompasses everything: mechanical stuff, aerodynamics, electronics, software, all things that,
maybe not aerodynamics, because let's be honest, quads have the bricks have better aerodynamics than quads.
Well, unless you fly something that's got, I won't reach them down, but I've got I've got two of the original Shendrone's squirts with the big ducts on, and there are some aerodynamics going on there, because it's like flying a cardboard box.
No, yes, you have to be of a little bit of everything with the RC and FPV. That's absolutely correct. And yes, for me, for example, this is extremely appealing. Because I'm a technical guy, I love to build, design, and put together stuff. The rare process, because I'm doing this less and less often, the process of building a quad is most probably even the better moment than actually flying the quad, because I'm building. Oh, I wonder what's gonna happen. So this is nice.
It's a strange addiction, isn't it? Building.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it's sort of that first time we just, I've done it so many times. And there's something quite pleasurable. I don't know what it is about, get the motors on, wire those up, and then you get it all together and you're thinking, I'm going to mess this up now by flying it. This looks beautiful. I'm just going to mess it up. Maybe that's why I don't crash so much, because I don't want to take those risks. And I have lost a lot of, I've lost 4 GoPro sessions, 4s and 5s, because they haven't been attached to so much stuff.
Rookie mistake.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
But to finish up with this ease of use and being a little of everything, it's simpler than it was.
Oh,
it's much simpler than it was.
By an order of magnitude, I would say. I mean, I got into multirotors just at the end of when you have to flash your own software on the ESCs, and it was using a so I can't really call the ED, can't remember those flashing tools you used to use on RG
FTDIs, yeah.
And just trying to get the thing to turn the motors was enough, let alone tuning it. Absolutely. You were able to buy the crappy hardware, install the crappy software, and you really had to read a lot. And on top of that, you had no good tutorials in the internet. Now everything is simpler. You probably have tutorials. It's really hard to buy bad hardware. There is no bad software on the market, so you just build it. Of course, then you forget the thread lock and everything. This integrates on your first build. Okay, we've been there. But people sometimes are trying to compare our FPV quads with, for example, the DJI. Oh, DJI can do this, DJI can do that, and it's so smooth, and so on, and so on, and so on. But this is a completely different. The hobby-grade stuff will never be as consumer-ready as the consumer design stuff. If you buy the DJI drone, you buy the DJI drone that you just get out from the box, charge the battery, and go flying. When you are building yourself, you not only have to build the hardware part, but also configure everything, set up, and flash the firmware, and have a lot of fun while trying to tune it.
We will never be the same.
No.
We will never be the same.
No. And I actually think there was a golden period, which I think started around sort of 2015, 2016, when there was sort of like a, maybe it's just because that's the sort of like the time frame that I got involved in the hobby, when it was quite difficult to get things built and flying. And then things started to smooth out, and I think I think it's almost coincidental with when 4-in-1 ESCs were accepted as the way of doing things, where sort of like the level of destruction of hardware and to some extent hardware sort of like plateaued out, and it sort of became quite nice and in some ways quite easy. Although I'm still, I still get inundated with questions, and I'm thinking, this seems, I know I've been around it a while, but there's a huge amount of confusion, even down to, how can you balance a 1S LiPo? How can you balance charging?
Good question.
And
good
it's sort
question.
of, there's a clear confusion there that somebody doesn't quite understand that whole sort of like the procedure of, the chemistry of batteries, what they do, how they're wired up, and all that sort of thing. But for me, that's part of the fun, is learning that whole.
Absolutely.
There's so many engineering skills that you have to touch to fly multi-rotors, and I think for me that's the attraction of it.
Yeah.
I guess because I'm a serial.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah.
I absolutely have to agree with that.
Fantastic. Well, look, we've been chatting away for about 50 minutes, and
Oh, really?
yeah, it's
Look
too
how
much
the
fun.
time flies.
It's too much fun.
Too much fun. Absolutely, too much fun.
Well, Pawel, to round up, all I can say is thank you very much for contributing your time. I know you're a busy man.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, and we should have another chat at some point, because there's plenty of new hardware coming out, even though prices are rising and electronics are difficult to hold
Don't even
up.
tell me about the prices. The prices are half of the problem. The second part of the problem is, for example, I'm from Poland, and in the last year, dollar went up like 40%, maybe 30%. It's like, come on! It's like a kidney for a flight controller.
Yeah, it's the same in the UK. I mean, interestingly, I have started ordering most of. I'm quite lucky that some manufacturers send me components for review. The majority are really good, and I think that's because I stick with certain companies who I know produce fantastic stuff. But I'm finding now that if I do need to buy something, I'm using the manufacturer's website directly to order things. It's quicker to get things. For example, Speedy Bee, I had to order another 4-in-1 ESC for my cine lifter. It came within 2 weeks, ordering direct from Speedy Bee.
I think in general shipping from China kind of improved, but I absolutely get what you are talking about, because this is indeed true. But let's not go into the Chinese retailers topic.
No, I think
today because this is absolutely too much.
We could talk for another hour on that.
Even more.
It's been fantastic to chat, Pawel. You have a great evening, and
thank you very much.
We should do this again. And again, thank you very much for your time. It's been fantastic.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye.
See you next time. I really must thank Pawel for being so generous with his time. He's clearly a busy chap, and it was great to finally meet and have a chat. And I'm sure that there's plenty more that we could have talked about, and maybe we'll see his propeller-powered bike on his channel. It does sound fantastic. Now, do check out Pawel's YouTube channel. There's some great content, and I put the link in the video description below. Now, I hope you enjoyed this, and maybe you could put in the comments below what you think, and if there's anything that you would have liked to have asked Pawel that I forgot to ask. And please do let me know what you thought about this format. It's a bit different from what I usually do, and I'd really like your feedback. Is it interesting, boring, entertaining, too long, or whatever? As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.